Today's objective is using specific details from the text in order to determine character traits of two or more characters. So, we're going to really be focused on that indirect characterization that we learned about in previous slides. So, indirect characterization is whenever the author shows me what a character is like rather than tells me. So, if we look here, we have some steps during our annotations, right? We need to first identify who the main characters are. And we know that main characters are often introduced to us during the exposition part of a plot. And we're starting chapter 1, which is going to introduce us to characters and settings. So we know that we're going to be introduced to some characters in this first chapter. Now, we need to identify whether or not the author is providing direct or indirect characterization. Now, oftentimes, especially in the beginning of the text, the author will tell us what a character is like, but they also show us because that's how the book becomes interesting, right? If they just tell us what's happening in the text, it can get really bland and really boring. But if they show me what a character is like, how they affect other people, what they're thinking, what their attitudes are like, then it makes it a little bit more interesting for us to read. So we're going to identify whether the author is providing that direct or indirect characterization. And this is where the STEAL acronym comes into play that we learned about. So if the author is using indirect characterization to talk about our character, we're going to identify what part of that STEAL acronym does this trait fall under. So is it something that they said? That would go under S, and we're going to annotate that. Now, I want you to remember that as we're annotating the text, we're still paying attention to figurative language that we come across, the characters, what motivates them, their problems, solutions, and maybe what lessons they learn throughout the story, right? Because whenever we're reading a novel, we come across several themes. So when we identify a theme or we think we know, we're going to annotate to that as well. So I don't want you to think that we're just looking at character or indirect characterization, though it is our focus and what we're going to spend most of our time doing. We still have to do those basic annotations because it helps us understand the story. All right. So the last step is we're going to provide that quotation. So if you look over here, I have a annotation page created. You can access this page on this slide if you choose to. So I'm okay with you just writing down your annotations like we do in class in our annotation notebook. Still needs to be formatted like this, but writing it down might be a little bit easier, especially for those of you on the Chromebooks. The screens aren't that large. It might be easier to just have the text displayed on your computer and write it down. The one thing that I do ask is you find a notebook, or if you're using pieces of paper, you keep it together, maybe put it in a folder. You want to keep it all together because we're going to need to look back at these annotations. Think about the other novels that we've read. We always flip back and we see how things compare to one another. Maybe something is retold later on in the story and we need to look back. So we want to make sure that we have those annotations handy with us in case we need them. Okay, so let's move on to our text. We are reading the first chapter, which is titled Cassius Clay. So this is going to be the I do portion. As I'm reading it, we're going to pause, have conversation, make some annotations. You can pause this video at any point if you feel like you need time to write down the annotations before we move on. Go ahead and do so. I'm going to highlight some things on this page over here. Whatever I'm highlighting will be transferred over here. I'm just going to highlight so that it'll be brought out so you can see what I'm talking about. It's not necessary for you to highlight your text when you start reading, but if you would like to, like I said, it's up to you. But we're definitely using this page over here. So let's go ahead and get started. Cassius Clay Clouds. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to look at that title and I'm going to decide, is there anything here to annotate? Well, In fact, there is. So Cassius Clay, I know that Cassius Clay, let me go ahead and write that over here. Cassius Clay is also known as, let's get our text a different color. Muhammad Ali, who is a famous boxer. So before Muhammad Ali was Muhammad Ali, he went by Cassius Clay. So he eventually changed his name, but he was originally known as Cassius Clay. So he was a famous boxer. All right. So why am I annotating this? Well, because maybe as I read, it will make sense why they named this title that. Remember, when we look at texts like, when we look at text, nonfiction text, fiction text, we always look at the title. What kind of information can I draw from this? Maybe what information, maybe it'll tell me what we're going to be reading about. Okay, so I know we have Ali, a famous boxer. It doesn't give me that much, but maybe as I read, it will become clearer for me. So let's go ahead and get started. Good thing the plane had seatbelts. We'd been strapped in tight before takeoff. Without them, the last jolt would have been enough to throw Vanetta into orbit and Fern across the aisle. Still, I anchored myself and my sisters best I could to brace us for whatever came next. Those clouds weren't through with us yet, and dealt another Cassius Clay left and a right jab to the body of our Boeing 727. All right, so I see this word here, anchored. And this is a word that stands out to me because I might not know what this is. All right, let's highlight that. Sorry. There we go. All right, so anchored. I'm going to come over here, and this is just a vocabulary word that might not be that familiar to me. So I'm going to write page 6, paragraph 1. Anchored. Now, what do they mean by that? Let's look at some context clues. Still, I anchored myself and my sisters best I could to brace us. So when you're bracing, right, you're preparing for something, for whatever came next. We also see that she was being jolted around. She said the last jolt would have been enough to throw Vanetta into orbit and Fern across the aisle. So they're experiencing like a rough flight, right? So if they're anchoring themselves based on this, they are going to brace themselves. See, we have another, remember we talk about context clues. We're often given either an explanation, a definition, a synonym, or an antonym. And over here, we're giving ourselves a synonym, bracing us. We know what an anchor is, right? It holds a ship in place whenever they throw their anchor out in the middle of the ocean. So we know that anchored means they're bracing themselves, holding themselves still. Okay, so they're anchoring themselves. All right, so what else stands out here? We know that Cassius Clay is Muhammad Ali, a famous boxer. What do they mean when they say it dealt yet another Cassius Clay left and a right jab to the body of our Boeing 727? Do you think that their plane was actually punched by Cassius Clay? No, right? This is a type of figurative language. And I want you to think for a second, what type of figurative language is this? What type of figurative language is this? We always annotate when we come across some figurative language, right? There's always a deeper meaning to it. So we know we have metaphors when we compare two unlike things, similes when we compare two unlike things using like or as. We have alliteration. I don't think this is alliteration here, right? We have personification when we give human-like characteristics to innate objects. Does that sound right? I think so. We have Cassius Clay, which is a person, a left-right jab. A jab is a punch to the body of our Boeing 727. That is an object. That's our plane. And they're talking about the clouds. Can clouds punch a plane? No. But this type of figurative language lets us know that the plane was being knocked around, right? It was experiencing a lot of turbulence. So this is page 6, paragraph 1. So let's annotate that. Sorry. Getting used to annotating on this here. All right. So we're going to put it in quotes because, right? And we can just kind of put these ellipses because we know how this ends. We just want to know what we're referencing. So left and right jab, the deeper meaning is the plane. Well, let's go ahead and write that this is personification, sorry. The plane was being knocked around by clouds. It was a rough flight, right? It wasn't a pleasant flight. They're being knocked around by the turbulence, okay? Now, we've annotated our vocabulary. We found personification, but we were also introduced to some people in this first paragraph. Were we told a lot about them? Not yet, right? We weren't told that much about them, but we were introduced to some characters. So we're still on page 6. We don't have to keep writing paragraph 1 if we haven't moved on. So we're just going to come over here and we will write, we were introduced to characters. We don't know anything about them yet, but we know who they are. We have Vonetta, we have Fern, and the narrator. The narrator, we don't know her name yet, but we do know if we look up here, it says my sisters. So we know that they are sisters. Okay, so let's keep reading. We're going to start at paragraph 2. Vonetta shrieked, then stuck her thumb in her mouth. Fern bit down on Miss Pattycake's pink plastic arm. I kept my whimper to myself. It was bad enough, my insides squeezed in and stretched out like a monkey's grinder's accordion. No need to let anyone know how frightened I was. Okay, so are we given indirect characterization here? Are we given indirect characterization? So, are we told what they're thinking? Were there some something that they've said? Some actions? I know that I see some actions here, right? Vonetta shrieked, then stuck her thumb in her mouth. Fern bit down on Miss Pattycake's plastic pink arm. So Miss Pattycake, we know that Miss Pattycake is not real. We know that Miss Pattycake is a doll. I think that's important. We don't want to confuse her with a character. So now we're going to put paragraph 2 because we're in a new paragraph here. So now character, or we're just going to put Miss Pattycake is Fern's doll. We have some more character traits that we can do with page 6. So we know that Fern bit down and she has a baby doll. So we, based on this action, this is an action. We know that Fern is childlike, right? She seems like she might be a child. She's young. We know this because she has a baby doll and she seems to be using it to comfort her, right? She's biting down on it, probably because she's scared as the plane is getting knocked around. So we know that this is an action. It shows that she carries a doll around and she's childlike. So we want to write why. So turn is violet because she carries around a doll and uses it for comfort. So we are making an inference based on her actions. This is how she is reacting to being afraid. This shows that she is a little scared. We also know that Vonetta sticks her thumb in her mouth. So Vonetta sticking her thumb in her mouth might suggest that she too is young. So we are going to go ahead and put C again. Action. Vonetta sticks her thumb in her mouth, suggesting she may be young or childlike. So you see, we're kind of charting these actions that we find as we read, and we're going to put them all together to make an assumption about what these characters are like, right? And we're going to continue to do this throughout our story. We still don't know that much about our narrator, okay? She does say that her insides screamed, but she kept her whimper to herself. So she wasn't going to let anybody know how she was feeling. So I want you to think back of the exercise we did yesterday when we talked about how caring for other people might make you different. And we know that our narrator is the person telling the story. We know that our narrator is the caretaker. So with her keeping her whimper to herself, it suggests this is her action as well. So let's start with that. It's her action. Our narrator, we don't know her name yet, keeps her feelings to herself. So no one knows how frightened she was. All right. She doesn't want anyone to know. Specifically who? Her sisters, right? She doesn't want her sisters to know how afraid she is. So this suggests that our narrator is a caretaker, right? If we're reading this, she's talking about her little sisters. She's the one who braced her sisters down in paragraph 1. She wants to make sure that she doesn't let her sisters know how scared she is, because she is the caretaker. And when you're a caretaker of other people, right, you often put their needs in front of your own, and that is what our narrator is doing. So let's continue. I took a breath, so when my mouth finally opened, I'd sound like myself and not some scared rabbit. It's just the clouds bumping, I told my sister, like they bumped over Detroit and Chicago and Denver. Vonetta pulled her thumb out of her mouth and put her head in her lap. Fern held on to Miss Pattycake. They listened to me. All right, so we can tell that paragraph 3, we can tell that the sisters trust our narrator. So this is page 6, paragraph 4, actually. Sorry about that. Oops. So we know that our narrator is perhaps trustworthy. We talk about the effect that characters have on others in the story. So this is for character, and we're going to do effect. The narrator is able to comfort her sisters because they trust her. So this suggests that perhaps she is trustworthy. So we're going to put this in parentheses. We're going to put this in parentheses because we still don't know a lot about her, but this suggests that at the very least, her sisters believe that she is trustworthy. They can believe what she says. She's telling them it's okay, so they're starting to relax. So we also, let's keep reading. We push our way up in the clouds. The clouds get mad and push back, like you and Fern fighting over red and gold crayons. I didn't know about clouds fighting and pushing for a fact, but I had to tell my sister something. As long as Vanetta kept her fear to one shrink and Fern kept hers to biting Miss Pattycake, I kept on spinning straw, making everything all right. That's mainly what I do, keep Vanetta and Fern in line. The last thing Pa and Big Ma wanted to hear was how we made a grand Negro spectacle of ourselves 30,000 feet up in the air around all these white people. Okay, so let's pause here. We see some more figurative language, right? We see the clouds get mad and push back, right? So I don't know why I made it pink. Okay. Well, it's pink. Sorry. I don't know how I did that. All right. So the clouds get mad and push back. We know that this is figurative language, so we need to annotate it. The clouds get mad, and we can stop there. All right. So what kind of figurative language is this? So can clouds get mad? No. Can people get mad? Yes. So this is, again, personification. It's just saying that, the same thing it was saying before, that the flight is pretty rough, that the plane is being knocked around. And we're still on page 6, but we're on a new paragraph. And that is paragraph 1, 2, 3, 5. Okay. We also see some actions, and we learn that our narrator keeps her sisters in line, right? She says that that's her job. That's her job. So these are her thoughts. She's telling us this, right? She's saying that her job is simply to keep them in line so that they are taken care of. So this, again, is a character trait. It's also a motivation. Like, why is she doing this? Well, because she needs to make sure that they're okay. This is what she was told to do by Big Ma and Pa. So we're going to put this as her actions, or her thoughts, I'm sorry. For T, she thinks her job is to keep her sisters in line. And then this is the motivation piece, because Big Ma and Pa told her this, right? Now, obviously, we are introduced to Big Ma and Pa. We don't know anything about them, but we can suggest that they are who's in charge of the girls, right? We don't know who they are, but we can make some assumptions. Let's keep reading. We might learn a little bit more. Actually, let me pause one more time. We want to look here, and this is a response I would like. I'm going to highlight it here for you, because you're going to come back and you are going to annotate. You're going to respond to this. So it says, the last thing Pa and Big Ma wanted to hear was how we made a grand Negro spectacle of ourselves 30,000 feet up in the air around all these white people. What does this suggest about the relationship between blacks and whites in this time period? Remember, we're not really made aware yet when this book takes place, other than, we read the back of the book, and we know that it's taking place in a time period, the civil rights movement. So use that background knowledge to help you make sense of this text. The last thing Big Ma and Pa wanted to hear was how we made a grand Negro spectacle. You're going to use this, and you're going to make an inference. You're going to tell me, what does this suggest about the relationships between black people and white people during this time period that this book was written? Okay, so let's keep going. You know how Papa is, I told him. No way he'd put us on a plane if it were dangerous. They halfway believed me. Just as As I had the soft plastic arm out of Fern's mouth, those Cassius Clay fighting clouds through our 727 another jab. We're not going to annotate this piece of personification because it's repeating itself, right? We don't need to annotate it every single time if it's not giving us new information. So let's keep going. Big Ma, that's Pa's mother, still says Cassius Clay. Pa says Muhammad Ali or just Ali. I slide back and forth from Cassius Clay to Muhammad Ali. Whatever picture comes to mind. With Cassius Clay, you hear the clash of fists like the plane getting jabbed and punched. With Muhammad Ali, you see a mighty mountain greater than Everest, and no one can knock down a mountain. Okay, so do you see how this paragraph relates to our title, right? This is why it was titled Cassius Clay. This whole chapter is about their experience on this flight, which is rough and getting knocked around. And Cassius Clay was a prominent figure during this time. He was very outspoken about things happening. So we want to, this is just, we're pausing here. We're not really going to annotate this, but it is important to know. So let's keep going. All the way to the airport, Pa had tried to act like he was dropping off 3 sacks of wash at the laundromat. I'd seen through Pa. He's no Vonetta putting on performances. He has only 1 or 2 faces, nothing hidden, nothing exaggerated. Even though it had been his idea that we fly out to Oakland to see Cecile, Pa never once said how exciting our trip would be. He just said that seeing Cecile was something whose time had come, that it had to be done. Just because he decided it was time for us to see her didn't mean he wanted us to go. So we learn a little bit about Big Pa here. So it appears that the girls live with Big Pa and Big Ma. Okay, and this is paragraph 1 of this page. So we're going to come over here. Oops, I keep doing that, sorry. And we're going to talk about who Big Pa is. Big Pa is who the girls live with. And we also learn, we have some indirect characterization here, right? His actions. And we have the thoughts of our narrator that kind of help us understand these actions. So sometimes with indirect characterization, we're given more than one. So we're going to put here, next line, we have some actions. It says that he was dropping off 3 sacks of wash at the laundromat. Pa tried to act like he was dropping off 3 sacks of wash at the laundromat. This suggests that he was pretending that he didn't care. However, the narrator is telling us that he's no Vonetta. So we also learned something about Vonetta putting on performances. And we see that his face showed. So we're going to do actions, looks. His actions and face show that he wasn't excited about the girls leaving, even though it was his idea for them to meet Cecile. So we have another character here, right? We're just going to put this little C in parentheses. We don't know that much about her. So, all right. So we're just going to keep it there. We're not going to really add her to our character list just yet. She's mentioned, but she's not formally a character. So we also learn about Vonetta. So this will be C. Let's go ahead and learn about Vonetta and her actions. We are told that she likes to put on performances. This suggests that she likes attention. right? People who put on performances and plays, they enjoy being in the spotlight, right? So this suggests that Vanetta enjoys being in the spotlight. So let's keep reading, and then you guys are going to take over and you are going to read and do some annotations. I'm going to finish this page. My sisters and I had stayed up practically all night, California dreaming about what seemed like the other side of the world. We saw ourselves riding wild waves on surfboards, picking oranges and apples off fruit trees, filling our autograph books with signatures from movie stars we'd seen in soda shops. Even better, we saw ourselves going to Disneyland. So, what do we learn here? We learn that they have some expectations of what this trip is going to be. So we want to annotate that. And we're probably going to have to come back to this a little bit later. So we're going to annotate this because we want to compare what their expectations were like and what they actually experience once they get there. Did they go to Disneyland? Do they get to do all of these things? So we are on paragraph 2. And we are annotating for characters and motivation. The girls have expectations for their trip to Cali. We also learned they're going to California, right? That's a big deal. They think they will go to beaches, Disneyland, and have a great time. I think they think this is going to be a great vacation. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to pause there because this recording is getting kind of long and we've done a lot. So I'm going to pause here and we are going to then have some conversations. So you're going to click on the next video. In the next video, we are going to talk about some questions. How do we use these annotations and this STEAL acronym to help us answer questions? Once we do that, you guys will be released. You're going to finish reading this chapter. So you have a couple of pages, and I am going to put the pages you need to read as well as an audio clip of these chapters being read aloud so that you can re-listen to them. It's important you follow along because in order to annotate, you need to do more than listen, right? But it will be available to those of you who would like to listen to the text while you read it. Okay, so go ahead and click on the next video and we will wrap this lesson up.